What calls our attention to the Swiss OTO, however, is an item recorded by Francis King in his Satan and Swastika, in which he mentioned that, in the first issue of its newsletter, EOL Mittelungsblatt, dated June 9th, 1954, the Abbey published a memorial notice for Lanz von Liebenfels, calling him a shining example of unswerving faith and the very highest virtue. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of The Stench of Truth. I said before and I'll say it again. You need to buy extra food now. You need to have a supply in case of an emergency. This is something that you should do as a matter of course and should be something that is done all the time and preparedness for you and for your family. But I want to read you some facts here just to iterate to you and to reiterate for some of you the global catastrophe that awaits us in food production and why this is a crucial fucking issue and something that you need to be on top of. You absolutely need to be on top of this. There are droughts everywhere, okay? That's first and foremost. China has the worst drought in 50 years in northern China, okay? Over half the wheat crop in 8 provinces is threatened by the drought. In Hainan, China's largest crop-producing province, has issued the highest level drought warning. In Anhui province issued a red drought alert with more than 60% of the crops north of the Huahe River plagued by a major drought. In Shaanxi province, they were put on an orange drought alert on January 21st. In Jiangsu, they've already lost over 1/5 of the wheat crops, which were affected by drought. In Hebei, over 100 million cubic meters of water has been channeled in from outside the province to fight Hebei's drought. In Shaanxi, 1.34 million acres of crops across the bone-dry Shaanxi province are affected by the worsening drought. In Australia, Australia has been experiencing an unrelenting drought since 2004, and 41% of Australia's agriculture continues to suffer from the worst drought in 117 years of record keeping. The drought has been so severe that rivers stopped flowing, lakes turned toxic, and farmers abandoned their land in frustration. In the United States, California is facing its worst drought in recorded history. The drought is predicted to be the most severe in modern times, worse than those in 77 and 91. Thousands of acres of row crops already have been fallowed, with more to follow. The snowpack in the northern Sierra, home to some of the state's most important reservoirs, proved to be just 49% of average. Texas. Texan drought is reaching historic proportions. Dry conditions near Austin and San Antonio have been exceeded only once before, and that was the drought of 1917 to 18. 88% of Texas is experiencing abnormally dry conditions, and 18% of the state is in either extreme or exceptional drought conditions. Florida has been hard hit by a winter drought. La Nina is likely to make matters worse. Enough water a couple of degrees cooler than normal has accumulated in the eastern part of the Pacific to create a La Nina. A weather pattern is expected to linger until at least the spring. La Nina generally means dry weather for southern states, which is exactly what the U.S. doesn't need right now. In South America, Argentina, the worst drought in half a century. Brazil has cut its outlook for crops and will do so again after assessing damage to plants from desiccation in drought-stricken areas. Paraguay, severe drought affecting Paraguay's economy. Uruguay declared an agricultural emergency last month. Bolivia, has not been a drop of rain in Bolivia in nearly a year. Cattle dying, crops ruined, etc. Chile. The severe drought affecting Chile has caused an agricultural emergency in 50 rural districts, and large sectors of the economy are concerned about possible electricity rationing in March. In the Horn of Africa, Africa faces food shortages and famine. In Kenya, Kenya is the worst hit nation in the region, having been without rainfall for 18 fucking months. Kenya needs to import food to bridge a shortfall and keep 10 million of its people from starvation. Tanzania had a poor harvest due to drought. South Africa faces a potential crop shortage after wheat farmers in the eastern part of the Free State grain belt said they were likely to produce their lowest crop in 30 years this year. South Africans are extremely angry that food prices continue to rise. In the Middle East and Central Asia, the Middle East and Central Asia are suffering from the worst droughts in recent history, and food grain production has dropped to some of the lowest levels in decades. Total wheat production in the wider drought-affected region is currently estimated to have declined by at least 22% in 2009. Iraq. During the winter growing season, there was essentially no measurable rainfall in many regions. Syria is expecting its worst drought in the past 18 years. Afghanistan. Lack of rainfall has led Afghanistan to the worst drought conditions in the past 10 years. Jordan's persistent drought has grown worse. Now, here are some other things that are going to make this matter even more difficult. A lack of credit will worsen the food shortage. A lack of credit for farmers curbed their ability to buy seeds and fertilizers in 2008 and 9 and will limit production around the world. Low commodity prices will worsen the food shortage. The low prices at the end of 2008 discouraged the planting of new crops in 2009. In Kansas, for example, farmers seeded 9 million acres, the smallest planting for half a century. Wheat planting this year are down about 4 million acres across the U.S. and 1.1 million acres in Canada. Europe will not make up for the food shortfall. Europe, the only big agricultural region relatively unaffected by drought, is set for a big drop in food production due to the combination of a late planting, poorer soil conditions, reduced inputs, and light rainfall. Europe's agricultural output is likely to fall by 10 to 15%. And stocks of foodstuff are dangerously low. Here's what we are looking at. In 2002 to 2005, there were 47.4 million tons in storage. 2007, 37.6 million tons. In 2008, 27.4 million tons. These inventory numbers are dangerously low, especially considering the horrifying possibility that China's 60 million tons of grain reserves doesn't actually exist. It's a global food catastrophe. The droughts that are plaguing the world's biggest agricultural region should end the debate about deflation in 2009. The demand for agricultural commodities is relatively immune to developments in the business cycle, at least compared to that of energy or base metals. And with a 20 to 40% decline in world production, already rising food prices are headed significantly higher. So, it looks as though food prices are going to continue to rise, and the food crisis is going to continue to get worse. So, as if I haven't pounded it into your fucking heads enough, buy food now while it's relatively fucking cheap, and while the US dollar is still worth more than fucking toilet paper. Put in a supply of food. You can't go wrong with it. If nothing happens, you have it to eat down the road. We are facing a global food crisis. Drought and lack of crops being planted, combined with the financial problems, has led to the point now where 2009 looks to be a very dismal year for food production. And Lord only knows what's going to be ahead for the future. Buy food now while you can. Stock up and put some aside. It can't hurt a fucking thing. and it certainly can fucking help. Thank you. Good night.